here I am in the labyrinth. Some might say this is my natural habitat. It's a flat labyrinth, but yeah, so I'm going to be doing a couple updates and a book review, actually. So I'm starting to do weekly videos, more like updates and book reviews and whatnot. So I've got Solaris, which I've just finished reading. And is this going to become a booktube type channel? Not yes and no. I will be doing regular reviews, but I'm not going to be going full on dedicating the channel to that. But for the updates, I've got some comics printed. First is the Maze catalog. That's starting. So this is a new comic series. It's just very simple. Just a character exploring these mazes. Yeah, not a lot of depth there, but a lot of mood and atmosphere to get lost in. And then I'm having many copies printed of Lishka, which is complete. And when I get all the copies, this is a test proof, but when I get all the copies, they'll be for sale. So look for that. I'll be making some notices about where you can get it and whatnot. And then after that, yeah, so let's talk about Solaris, because this is a book that I really have wanted to read for a long time. I grew up, I guess, I don't know, through my adolescence, really liking the Tarkovsky film, and then more recently kind of like drifting away from Tarkovsky and not liking his movies as much anymore. I'd say Solaris I probably like the most, but there's a lot of stuff in it that kind of irritates me. It's just his style, some of his philosophic ramblings and quotations that I think kind of weigh down the movies, but that's neither. I mean, there is a lot of that in this book, but I think it works better in a book. And so for years, I've been wanting to get this book, but I didn't, because every single time I came upon a copy, it was the Steven Soderbergh movie tie-in edition with a picture of George Clooney and his co-star. I forget her name, but like they're kissing or about to kiss on the cover, and like I just didn't want to be reading that copy. So like this isn't much better, but it's definitely like better. And I kind of wish I could have found the one with the Paul Lair cover. If you hear any noise in the background, it's from some construction that's going on somewhere over this wall. But as for the book, I gotta say, like, it's been a while since I've gotten into a really meaty science fiction book, or book for that matter, because or fiction, I should say, because lately I've been on a nonfiction skew. I just finished a book on the Hollywood studio system, the genius of the system by Thomas Schatz, which was excellent. But I really needed to get on back into fiction, especially science fiction. So, and for a while I'd been doing books that were on a list that I've been randomly generating, because I just had so many to be read after I got this immense haul, which I talk about in a previous contents video, which was, I guess, my old name for these vlogs. But this was not one of those books. This I bought in Prescott, Arizona, actually, when I was out visiting my brother. But it's, so getting into the book finally, I was not disappointed. Because for me, I'm unabashedly into the genre elements. I'm into the weird. I'm into the fantastical stuff. But I wanted to embrace what science fiction has to offer, and this pretty much sums up like what I think like some of the best stuff you can get out of SF. But basically, there is this planet called Solaris, and it's covered in this living plasma ocean that, is incomprehensible. It does incomprehensible but beautiful things. It's sometimes dangerous, but this levitating station is constantly in its atmosphere, trying to understand it, and basically that is the main theme of the book. In so many words, just it's the incomprehensibility of the unknown, and yet man continues to bang his head against the wall trying to understand it. And coming at this from my own perspective, which is not a purely materialistic, scientistic view of the world, I found it really compelling and interesting, and also it has like this, a very dark, kind of almost tragic end where, but I'll get to that. The main character, Chris, he comes to the station, and once there, his colleague he finds has killed himself, and then there's no, it's really, the station's in disrepair. There's only a couple other people there, and it's eventually Chris kind of discovers that there are these extra visitors that come onto the station who are basically corporeal manifestations of memories of the actual crew on the station. So his dead wife, who killed herself, appears, and it's really harrowing initially to think about, like, her knowing things that he never told her, she never knew, because these things are drawn out of his own mind. So this ocean, this intelligence is filling in those gaps through her, but also she's extremely, anxious to be around him. The ocean seems to make it a prerogative that she stay by his side, even to the point of bursting through metal walls. And then, like, her cell structure is, like, constantly regenerated because, like, she's being held together at the most, like, subatomic level. All these really cool concepts, and that make for, like, some disturbing scenes, incredibly memorable ones. And, I went into this trying to forget about the movie, even though it was hard, in some ways. But I think I wish that there was a lot in the movie that that wasn't, because one of my favorite things about this book, just like I'm saying, my unabashed love of the fantastic, gets into the descriptions of the planet itself, this ocean of plasma and foam and sort of this sinuous goo. I just love that kind of stuff. But the descriptions of it, done by this, basically a century's worth of research done on it, and Chris goes through this library that's on the station. And that's one thing I also love, is the sense of this kind of like dusty future. It's worn, we all are familiar with that, but sort of a future that has a history, and it's a dusty future. It's a dusty history. It's volumes laden with, just kind of outmoded assertions, and I think those were some of my favorite parts of the book. And I like the drama with his wife Rhea, or the simulacrum of her, was pretty potent. And I will say, the way that it's described in the book, describing her and how she acts, it's almost presaging how someone might attempt to reconstruct a dead loved one through AI, in that it's sort of it's like a stylized version it's like mixed with something else. And yet the more it's around, the more authentic it feels, more, and that was something that was in the back of my mind while I was watching, or while I was reading this. But as it goes on, I think there's a scene where he's spending there's a long chapter where he's just reading through all these different accounts of the various structures and things that appear out of the ocean. These kind of like beautiful symmetrical structure, they're called symmetriads, and they're so vast. that they stretch miles, and they become rigid, and to a point where people can land on them and explore inside them, which is cool because I love that kind of stuff. And in the descriptions of these wide chasms with, like he said, I think he mentions it was like bigger than the Grand Canyon or as big, and with these tendon like things stretching between them, just really inconceivably bizarre stuff. And you really feel like the alienness of it, and it's rare. I know there's probably been a lot of imitators with this book, but you can always tell when you get to the source of a sort of theme in science fiction. And so, going through that stuff, I could recommend it alone on that, but there was a lot of, grappling with, what do we do with this station after 100 years of investigating this planet, and you basically have nothing concrete to assert. But there is a section where he's talking about how the solaristics, which is basically the study of Solaris, it becomes like a religion, but Stanislaw Lem doesn't account, as I expected he wouldn't, that he basically saying that like Solaris is like the older religions, which in this book, I guess it seems like they're outmoded, outdated, and which doesn't really feel so much writing from inside a Soviet state as it is just a modernist kind of sensibility that you see a lot in SF elsewhere. But basically, Solaris is like this grappling towards a mystery, but it's not revealing itself. And I would counter with that. It says, with Christianity and the Bible, like the Bible contains revelation from God. You take it or leave it, but and with Solaris, there's no direct revelation. There's only the phenomenal ocean, and the religion parallel does work within the context of science, hoping that a breakthrough in knowledge will equate to a transcendent moment or revelation. And by the end of the book, it kind of becomes that, except he sort of degrades this idea of it being a god down to it being a sick god, a dying god, or just something as flawed as mankind. And that's where I found that it was a very like despairing kind of ending, even though, because he goes down to this this sort of like hardened plastery island called a Mimoid, that kind of looks like I think Lem compares it to like a Moroccan town, but it's kind of like distorted and breaking apart, and he touches the ocean. The ocean sort of like kind of like separates around his hand, like it sort of doesn't touch him, but he's trying to like meet this thing head on and touch it, and he can, and he kind of resolves that like he'll just be there. He'll just keep waiting for these cruel miracles, as it says, to happen. And so I think the book left off on a very dour note in a sense, but on the other hand, it also, you could say it was sort of, the persistence of it, the desire to keep plumbing the unknown because it is so compelling, which I can understand. And I think I'll put this on a pretty high on the list of books I've read recently. And that about does it. I would say this was a really quick, it was a quick read. It was like 204 pages, so I wouldn't, I read it in a week. I took my time and I savored it because I was enjoying the content so much. Now, as for the movie, in the movie it focuses way more on the relationship between the wife and Chris. You see the ocean, but you don't see any of the incredible extrusions that it produces, which on the one hand, that would have been pretty difficult, at least to do in the sort of uncut, full-on way that we are used to movies doing now. But I think that Tarkovsky just didn't like science fiction, which does annoy me. That is something, especially after hearing about Stalker and the making of that movie, how he just almost was spiteful towards the audience that wanted more of a genre type thrill or like science fictional stuff. And I don't know. I think I'm not going to get into it anymore. I always go on this rant when people are talking about Tarkovsky, but I feel like a lot of it feels like my time's being wasted sometimes in those movies. You cut out like 30 minutes of Stalker, but anyhow, it was raining pretty hard earlier today, so the clouds broke a couple hours ago, and it's still kind of cool out. I think the trees are still dripping a little bit, but yeah, so I guess this could be a weekly occurrence. I'm planning on making it a weekly occurrence to do these kinds of videos, so you'll have another book review and update next week. So till then, have a good day.